During cold weather months, some methods of keeping warm can unintentionally cause carbon monoxide poisoning. It comes after 2 teenage boys and a 22-year-old man died of suspected carbon monoxide poisoning in Limpopo when they kept warm by putting a braai stand in an enclosed room. Let's talk more about the dangers of this with Special Investigator Bezuidenhout. Mr. Bezuidenhout, a pleasure to have you on the program this afternoon. Firstly, can you explain to us what carbon monoxide poisoning is and why it's so dangerous?
Yes, good afternoon, and good afternoon to your viewers. So, carbon monoxide poisoning essentially happens when you inhale carbon monoxide. Now, carbon monoxide is a gas that you cannot see and you cannot smell. And that gas actually attaches to your red blood cells better than oxygen. So if you inhale carbon monoxide, you're getting carbon monoxide in your blood and not actual oxygen. So it reduces your oxygen levels. It causes you to lose consciousness, to become weak and timid, and essentially you fall asleep, go into a very deep sleep, and ultimately, unfortunately, pass away because you're accumulating or you're using up no oxygen and this gas instead.
Regarding the recent tragic incidents that I mentioned in my intro in Limpopo, what are your initial thoughts on how the carbon monoxide poisoning occurred here?
Yeah, so it's very simple. Carbon is, or charcoal specifically, is essentially just carbon. When you normally burn it in an outdoor environment, what it does is it binds with oxygen as it burns. It causes carbon dioxide, and it essentially just turns into that and a bit of water as it burns. The minute you limit the amount of oxygen available to that carbon, it starts becoming imperfectly burned. So then it starts producing carbon monoxide, which is the dangerous chemical. Now, the more the oxygen levels in an environment drop, such as in an indoor environment, in an enclosed setting, the more it produces carbon monoxide. Because you can't smell it and you can't see it, you won't know that you're changing. And especially if you're relaxing or trying to sleep or going to sleep, you'll be poisoned without even realizing.
So what are some of the most common sources of carbon monoxide this time, in households especially? And why are they particularly hazardous during cold weather?
Essentially, it comes down to charcoal. Any completely burned wood product that's compressed or turned into pure carbon, essentially any carbon-based product, essentially is used for the most obvious thing, fire and heating. Now, people mistakenly believe that because it's lovely to sit around the fire outside and to warm your hands, that if you could bring that heat inside, you'd have a better situation, especially in the winter months, as we see now. Unfortunately, funny, I was just at a conference for the South African Academy of Forensic Sciences, where a toxicologist used the example of a guy actually putting charcoal in the trunk of his car, in his boot, and he was trying to keep warm in his car, and unfortunately, he also passed away, and it's essentially the same thing. Confined space, inadequate ventilation, burn carbons, it produces carbon monoxide, and unfortunately, you literally don't even see it coming. And if you don't intervene, or if you're not aware of what's happening, you can unfortunately simply fall asleep, go into a deeper sleep and pass away, sadly.
I want to speak of something you touched on a short while ago about the symptoms that people should be aware of that might indicate carbon monoxide poisoning. How can it be detected early here?
So it's very difficult for you to detect it when you're using it in a nighttime environment where you're trying to make it comfortable for yourself to sleep, because you might naturally fall asleep. You can't smell it, you can't sense it, and gradually it'll reduce your oxygen supply. But for the observer from the outside, in the early stages, if you are awake and alert, or if somebody can observe you, you'll immediately start seeing that you feel fatigued. You'll feel kind of that your fingers might start tingling. You might start feeling a heaviness in your limbs. You can kind of feel lethargic. Any symptoms that create the impression that you are weakening or losing control of your body is a huge warning. And then also, you might even find that your fingertips are starting to blue. And that's, I'm talking about your fingernails. It's very difficult to see carbon monoxide poisoning in anybody with the darker skin, because their cuticles aren't as visible, and especially lips might turn blue. But again, if you're dark skinned, like our African cultures and African people are, it's much more difficult to see from the outside. But whenever somebody suddenly feels very sleepy, or starts feeling weak, or starts feeling lame and tired in an environment where it makes no sense, this could be the consequence. But if they don't know that there is a chemical, since they cannot smell or see it, they might just think they're tired or they're sleepy and they won't even realize what's happening. It's extremely dangerous.
it's extremely dangerous. But do you believe there is enough public awareness about these dangers of carbon monoxide? And also, what can be done to improve this information as well?
So firstly, I think no, it's absolutely not enough. There's not enough information. I don't think the average citizen would know that there's a noxious gas that can come from something as common as charcoal or partially burned wood. The only solutions we could have is probably some kind of public education. It's probably better for the people producing charcoal to start putting in some kind of chemical that you can smell that could potentially bind with or interact with carbon monoxide or with any kind of degradation of carbon. But the unfortunate thing is, if you give somebody the option of literally feeling like they're dying of the cold or facing the cold we're having, and the option of having something warm in their house, I don't think we can expect of them to necessarily think as far and as rationally as whether there's a chemical that can be produced or not. So public education has probably got to start at primary school for little children to learn, so that by the time they grow up as adults or as responsible teenagers, they can make the decisions to bring those things into the household, especially in confined spaces. They would be aware of the dangers. Perhaps you could have carbon monoxide sensors, but in the South African context, when people are at the stage where they have to burn chemical or burn charcoal just to keep warm, I don't think they can afford warning devices that take batteries and that can detect carbon monoxide. So it's a difficult situation.
By the way, question on my end, is there any kind of signing or warning as well that comes with the packaging for instance, charcoal? It's the same as you would for cigarettes, about the dangers that lie within the chemicals that are contained in that substance?
Not that I'm aware of. Simply on account of the fact that a lot of the charcoal products you can buy in South Africa are actually produced, for lack of a better term, on the side of the road. You go into most of the rest of Africa and you see a lot of trees cut down the way they create charcoal. And charcoal is very easy to make. You burn wood to the point where it's burned completely, you compress it into little briquettes and you can sell it. So no, it's not a controlled product. Charcoal itself, it's not a product that anybody naturally consumes. There's currently, in my mind, nothing that requires of a producer of charcoal to specifically place any kind of warning. And if they do, what would that warning look like? Because it's rather complex to say, do not use this product in a confined space because it might produce carbon monoxide. This is a silent killer that I think people should be educated about. It's more likely to reach the target that way than to expect people to read the packages and understand the chemical composition of products.
Thank you so much for your time. That's Bezuidenhout. He's a special investigator getting his views into the dangers of carbon monoxide.